The great hall had been built for power. Not comfort. Not beauty. Power. Golden light poured from towering windows, spilling across polished stone floors that had witnessed centuries of dominance, judgment, and ruin. Massive pillars carved with the victories of past alphas rose toward a vaulted ceiling where shadows clung like silent witnesses. Every sound echoed here. Every whisper carried. And today there were no whispers. Only laughter. Low at first. Then spreading. Then swelling into something cruel. Because, at the center of it all, she knelt, bruised, breathing shallow. Her dress, once something soft and pale, was now stained with dust and streaks of blood. Strands of dark hair clung to her damp skin, partially hiding her face as she bowed her head toward the cold stone beneath her. She did not look up. She did not speak. She did not move. Above her, seated on a throne carved from obsidian and bone, the Alpha King laughed. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The kind of laughter that didn't seek attention because it already owned it. He leaned forward slightly, one arm draped over the armrest, fingers tapping lazily against the carved wolf skull beneath his hand. His crown caught the light, gold threaded with iron, sharp and unyielding. His gaze rested on her like a verdict already decided. "Look at her," he said, voice smooth, cutting through the hall with effortless authority. "This is what they sent me?" A ripple moved through the crowd. Dozens, no, hundreds of wolves stood in a wide circle around them. Warriors, nobles, observers. Every rank, every gaze fixed on the girl at the center. Waiting, watching, judging. The king tilted his head slightly, studying her as though she were something broken, something disappointing. "Is this a joke?" he continued. "Or has the standard truly fallen this low?" Laughter answered him. Louder this time. Sharper. Crueler. "She can barely stand. She smells like fear. Does she even have a wolf?" The words struck like stones. One after another. Relentless. But still, she did not react. Her hands remained where they rested against the floor. Fingers curled slightly into the stone, as if holding onto something unseen. Her shoulders rose and fell in slow, controlled breaths. Too controlled. Too deliberate. The Alpha King noticed. Of course he did. His eyes narrowed just slightly. Not suspicion. Not yet. Curiosity. He leaned forward a fraction more, elbows now resting on his knees, his presence pressing down on the space between them like a weight. "Stand," he ordered. The word landed heavy. Final. For a moment, nothing happened. A pause stretched through the hall, thin and tight like a wire pulled too far. Then, slowly, she moved. Her fingers pressed harder into the stone. Her arms trembled as she forced herself upward, muscles protesting, body unsteady. One knee lifted, then the other. She rose. Barely. Unbalanced. Weak. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Pathetic. The king exhaled softly through his nose, unimpressed. "Look at you," he said quietly, almost conversational now. "You can't even hold your own weight." More laughter. It echoed higher this time, bouncing off the vaulted ceiling, filling every corner of the hall. Still, she said nothing. Her head remained lowered, eyes hidden, silent. And that silence began to stretch. Too long. Too still. Something about it didn't match the scene. Didn't match the fear they expected. Didn't match the weakness they were certain of. The Alpha King's gaze sharpened. Just a fraction. He shifted in his throne, posture straightening almost imperceptibly. Because beneath the humiliation, beneath the trembling, there was something else. Something subtle. Something wrong. Her fingers twitched. It was small. So small most wouldn't have seen it. But he did. A faint movement against the stone. Not panic. Not desperation. Control. The air changed. It was barely there. A whisper. A shift in pressure that brushed against the senses like the edge of something unseen. The torches along the walls flickered. Once. Then steadied. A guard near the edge of the circle frowned slightly, adjusting his stance without understanding why. And then, for a single fleeting second, the Alpha King's wolf stirred. Not fully. Not visibly, but enough. A flicker beneath the surface. A pulse of instinct. A warning. His jaw tightened. His fingers stilled against the armrest. And his eyes, cold, calculating, locked fully onto the girl before him. Not with mockery this time. Not with amusement, but with something far more dangerous. Recognition. Something wasn't aligning. Something wasn't adding up. Because broken things didn't feel like this. Weak things didn't shift the air. And whatever knelt before him now was not what it appeared to be. The laughter in the hall began to fade, slowly, unevenly, as if the room itself was sensing the shift. But no one spoke. No one understood it yet. No one except him. The Alpha King leaned forward, gaze narrowing as the silence thickened around them. Watching, measuring, waiting. And, in that moment, just before anything truly changed, he realized something that sent a quiet, dangerous ripple through his instincts. Something wasn't right. The silence did not break. It stretched.
Thin, tight, suffocating.
Like the entire hall was holding its breath, waiting for something it didn't yet understand. The Alpha King did not move at first. He simply watched her. Not as a ruler observing a failure. Not as a man mocking something beneath him, but as a predator recalculating. Then slowly, deliberately, he leaned back into his throne. The moment shifted. The weight of his presence settled once more over the hall, heavy and absolute, as if whatever flicker had passed through him had been dismissed. Or buried. A faint smirk touched his lips again. Interesting, he murmured. The word was quiet, but it carried. It always did. And just like that, the tension cracked. The crowd, uncertain for only a heartbeat, fell back into what it understood best.
Cruelty.
She can't even look at him. Pathetic creature. They said she failed 3 pack trials, 3. Not even fit to be claimed. The voices overlapped now, louder, more confident. Because it was easier to laugh than to question. Easier to follow than to think. And at the center of it all, she remained exactly where she was.
Standing. Barely.
Her shoulders still trembled under the weight of exhaustion. Her breathing remained slow, controlled, measured in a way that didn't quite match the image of weakness they had already decided she was. Her head stayed lowered, eyes hidden beneath the shadow of damp, tangled hair. No defiance, no plea, no sound, just silence. And that silence began to irritate him. The Alpha King's gaze hardened. He shifted forward again, one boot planting firmly against the step below his throne. His presence sharpened, pressing outward like a storm gathering pressure beneath the surface. Raise your head. The command was softer this time, but far more dangerous, because it wasn't for the crowd. It was for her. A test, a challenge, a demand for acknowledgement. For a moment, nothing. Then slowly, she obeyed. Her chin lifted. Just enough. Not fully. Not submissively.
Not boldly.
Something in between. Her face came into the light. Bruised. Yes. Dust-streaked. Yes. But not broken. Not the way they expected. Her lips were pressed into a thin line. Not trembling. Not pleading. Held. Controlled. And her eyes. Still hidden. Still angled just low enough to avoid direct contact. Careful. Deliberate. The Alpha King noticed that too.
Of course he did.
A faint crease appeared between his brows. Look at me. This time, there was no softness. The word struck like a blade. Sharp. Unavoidable. The entire hall leaned into the moment. Watching. Waiting. Because this was where the weak broke. Where they flinched. Where they begged. Where they revealed exactly how small they truly were. And slowly, she lifted her gaze. Their eyes met. For the first time. The effect was immediate. Subtle. But undeniable. Something in his expression stilled. Just for a fraction of a second. Because what he expected to see wasn't there. No panic. No desperation. No shattered fear begging for mercy. There was pain, yes. Buried deep. Layered beneath exhaustion. But above it, something colder. Something contained. Something that did not belong in a failed Omega. The moment lingered. Too long. Long enough for the unease to begin creeping outward again. A noble in the crowd shifted. A warrior frowned. Someone at the back stopped laughing.
They didn't know why.
They just felt it. The king exhaled slowly. A controlled breath. Then, he smiled. Not with amusement. Not entirely. But with something sharper. More interested. "Ah," he said, voice low. "There you are." The words didn't quite sound like mockery anymore. They sounded like discovery. He rose from his throne. The movement was unhurried. But it changed everything. The room reacted instantly. Backs straightening, voices dying, attention snapping fully forward as he descended the steps one by one. Each footstep echoed. Heavy, measured, deliberate, until he stood before her. Close. Too close. Close enough to see every detail. The faint tremor in her arms. The tight control in her jaw. The way her fingers flexed again against her sides. Close enough to feel it. That subtle shift in the air. That wrongness. That quiet pressure. He circled her once. Slowly. Like a predator assessing something it couldn't quite classify. She was brought in at dawn. Someone from the crowd offered quickly, eager to fill the silence. No pack would claim her. Failed every trial. No measurable strength. No wolf response. Enough. The king didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The speaker fell silent instantly. The king stopped in front of her again.
Studying.
Measuring. Dissecting. A failed omega, he repeated softly, as if testing the words themselves. Rejected, discarded, useless. A pause. Then, he reached out.
Not to strike.
Not to harm, but to lift her chin, forcing her gaze fully upward. Their eyes locked again. Closer now. Unavoidable. Strange, he murmured. His thumb pressed lightly beneath her jaw. Not gentle, not cruel. Just enough to hold her in place. Because weak things. His voice dropped lower. Don't look back like that. A flicker.
There.
So fast it could have been imagined. But he saw it. And this time,
he knew he saw it.
Something moved behind her eyes. Not fear. Not submission. Something sharper. Something restrained. Something waiting. The king's grip tightened just slightly. Interest deepened. The hall had gone completely silent now. No laughter. No whispers. Only the sound of breath. Of anticipation. Of something building that no one could name. Then suddenly, he released her. Stepped back. Turned. And climbed the steps of his throne again. As if the moment had ended. As if nothing had changed. But everything had. He sat once more. Posture relaxed. One arm draped across the armrest as before. Only now, his gaze never left her. Very well, he said, voice carrying easily through the hall. If this is what they've sent me. A faint smile curved his lips again. Cold. Measured. Calculating. Then let's see exactly how worthless you truly are. A ripple of anticipation surged through the crowd. They knew what came next. They always did. Trials. Tests. Breaking points. And she, still standing at the center, did not move.
Did not speak.
Did not resist. Only watched. Only waited. And somewhere beneath the surface, something continued to press outward. Quiet. Controlled. Dangerous. The Alpha King leaned forward slightly. Eyes locked onto hers. Voice low. Almost curious now. As if the question mattered more than it should. Tell me. A pause. The entire hall leaned into it. Can you even shift? The great hall did not breathe. It waited. The towering pillars, etched with centuries of conquest and dominance, stood like silent witnesses. Torches flickered along the obsidian walls, their flames bending. Not to wind, but to something heavier. Something building. At the center of it all, she stood. Alone. Small beneath the weight of 1,000 watching eyes. The Alpha King leaned forward on his throne, fingers drumming slowly against carved stone, each tap echoing like a countdown. His gaze never left her. Cold. Measured. Unimpressed. Then, he rose. Not quickly. Not dramatically. But with the kind of deliberate power that made the entire hall shift with him. A ripple moved through the gathered wolves as he descended the steps of his throne, boots striking the polished floor with quiet authority. Each step closer, each step heavier, until he stood before her, towering, dominant, unchallenged. Stand straight.
His voice was calm. Too calm.
The kind of calm that didn't need volume to command obedience. She tried. Her shoulders tightened. Her spine stiffened, but the weight in the room pressed down harder. Because it wasn't just him anymore. The Alpha King turned slightly, his voice cutting across the hall. Let them feel it. A pause. Then, it began. One by one, the wolves stepped forward. Not physically, but spiritually, powerfully. Their auras, raw, predatory, suffocating, unleashed into the space like invisible storms colliding. The air thickened. Pressure mounted. It wasn't seen. It was felt. A crushing, primal force that clawed at the lungs, tightened around the ribs, and pressed directly against the soul. Her breath hitched. Just once. But that was all it took. The first wave struck her. Her knees trembled. Her fingers twitched at her sides. The second, her vision blurred. The edges of the world began to darken. The third,
She dropped.
her knees hit the floor with a sharp, echoing crack that cut through the hall. And then, laughter. It started small, a single scoff from somewhere in the crowd, then another, and another, until the great hall was filled with it.
Low.
Cruel, mocking, pathetic. Is this the one who dared stand before the Alpha? I've seen pups hold better than that. The sound wrapped around her, suffocating in a different way now. Not pressure, but humiliation. Her palms pressed against the cold obsidian floor. Her head hung low, hair falling like a curtain, hiding her face, hiding her eyes. But something was wrong, because beneath her trembling fingers, the floor shifted. It was subtle, so subtle most didn't notice. A faint, almost imperceptible crack. A thin fracture spidered outward from where her hand touched the ground. Not from impact, not from weight, but from something else. Something inside her. A guard near the edge of the circle stiffened. His laughter died instantly. His instincts, sharper than pride, older than loyalty, reacted before his mind could catch up.
He took a step back.
Just one. But it was enough. Because he felt it, even if he didn't understand it. And then, her eyes, still hidden behind strands of hair, still lowered toward the ground, but for a fraction of a second, they flickered. Not with light, not with reflection, but with something unnatural. Something that did not belong to weakness. Something that did not belong to prey. Her fingers curled tighter against the fractured stone. Her body trembled harder now, but not from the pressure.
No.
Not anymore. From restraint. Inside her mind, a voice. Not external, not separate, but hers. Fractured.
Strained.
Breaking under its own containment. Not here. Her breath shook. Not now. The cracks beneath her palms spread another inch. Invisible to most, but not to all. Don't let it out. The pressure in the room surged again as another wolf released his aura, trying to force her lower, trying to break her completely. But something didn't add up. Because she wasn't resisting the room. She was resisting herself. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed. For the first time, not in boredom, not in dismissal, but in curiosity. He stepped closer. Close enough now that his shadow swallowed her entirely. Close enough to see the tremor in her shoulders, the tension in her fingers, the fractures beneath her hand. Close enough to feel it.
Faint.
Buried.
But there.
Something ancient. Something restrained. Something dangerous. The laughter around them continued. Unaware.
Blind.
Foolish. He leaned down slightly. Just enough for his voice to reach only her. A whisper. Sharp as a blade. Pathetic. A pause. Measured. Intentional. I've seen stronger strays. Silence. For half a second, nothing moved. Nothing changed. And then, her head lifted. Just slightly. Not enough for the crowd to notice. Not enough to break the illusion. But enough for him to see her eyes. And in that single, fleeting moment, the air shifted. Not in pressure, not in sound, but in something far more dangerous. Recognition. Something had just looked back at the Alpha King. The shift was subtle. So subtle most of them missed it. But the Alpha King did not. He remained still where he stood, towering over her kneeling form, yet something in his posture had changed. Not his dominance, not his authority, but his focus. It sharpened, narrowed,
Locked.
because that brief lift of her head, that flicker in her eyes, it did not match the girl trembling at his feet. It contradicted her, and contradiction, in a world ruled by instinct and hierarchy, was dangerous. The hall, however, remained blind. The laughter had not fully faded. The whisper still crawled through the crowd like parasites feeding on weakness. They saw what they wanted to see. A broken girl. A failed challenger.
A mistake.
The Alpha King straightened slowly, his gaze never leaving her. His voice, when it came, was no longer bored, no longer amused. It was testing. Enough. The single word cut through the hall like a blade. Laughter died instantly. Spines straightened. Silence fell, thick and obedient. He turned slightly, not away from her, but outward, toward the wolves who had so eagerly mocked. Make her bleed. The command landed without hesitation, without question, because in this world, the Alpha did not suggest. He decided. A ripple of anticipation passed through the crowd. Not excitement. Something darker. Something hungry. From the circle, one stepped forward. A warrior. Broad-shouldered.
Scarred.
His presence alone carried weight, earned through battle, reinforced through dominance. His eyes locked onto her with a predator's certainty. This would be quick. He rolled his shoulders once, slow and deliberate.
Cracked his neck.
Then began to walk. Each step echoed. Measured. Confident. She did not move. Still on her knees. Still bent forward slightly. Still appearing broken. The warrior stopped a few feet from her. Tilted his head. Almost disappointed. This is what we're testing now. His voice was low, laced with disdain. A murmur of agreement rippled through the watching wolves. The Alpha King said nothing. He watched. Always watching. The warrior exhaled sharply. Then, he moved.
Fast.
Not just fast.
Trained.
Efficient. The kind of speed honed through years of combat. His body surged forward, arm pulling back. Claws extending. A strike aimed not to kill, but to humiliate. To wound. To prove a point. Gasps rippled through the hall. Some leaned forward. Others smirked in anticipation. She still hadn't moved. The distance closed. Rapidly. 5 steps. 4. 3. And still, nothing. Her head remained lowered. Her body still trembling. Her hand still pressed against the cracked obsidian floor. 2. The warrior's lips curled slightly. Victory already decided. 1. And then, she moved. Not early. Not defensive. Not reactive. Precise. At the final possible second, when impact was certain, when there was no room left for error, she disappeared from where she had been. Not vanished. Not faded.
Moved.
But so fast, so impossibly fast, that the eye could not follow the transition. The warrior's strike cut through empty space. His expression shifted instantly. From confidence to confusion, because she was no longer there. She was beside him.
Low.
Grounded. Balanced. And for the first time, she was not trembling. Her hand shot upward.
Not wildly.
Not desperately. Deliberately. 2 fingers pressed against a precise point beneath his ribs. A nerve. A weakness. A flaw in his stance that only someone with impossible awareness could exploit in motion. And then, she pushed. Not with brute force. With control. The result was violent. The warrior's body lifted off the ground. Not stumbled. Not staggered. Launched. He was thrown backward across the hall with a force that defied logic, slamming into the stone floor with a thunderous crack that echoed through the chamber. Silence followed. Not gradual. Not hesitant. Instant. Absolute. The kind of silence that suffocates. Because no one understood what they had just seen. The warrior groaned from where he lay, struggling to breathe, his body refusing to obey him. Not defeated, not broken, but overridden. The crowd stared, eyes wide, minds racing, instincts confused. Because that was not strength, not in the way they understood it. That was something else. Something refined, something restrained, something
Wrong.
She remained where she had moved, half crouched, one hand still slightly raised. Her breathing steady now, too steady. Her head slowly lifted, not abruptly, not dramatically, but with quiet inevitability. Her face emerged from behind the curtain of her hair. No tears, no humiliation, no weakness, only stillness, only control. And, beneath it, something deeper, something watching them, the same way they had been watching her. The balance had shifted, and everyone in the room felt it, even if they could not explain it. Especially him. The Alpha King stepped forward again, but this time, there was no mockery in his eyes. No dismissal, no boredom, only interest. Pure, focused, dangerous. Because now, he was no longer observing a failure. He was studying a threat, or perhaps, something far more valuable. His gaze locked onto hers, unflinching, unyielding. For a moment, even he said nothing, because words, for the first time, required thought. Then finally, slowly, carefully, he spoke. What? A pause. Measured. Heavy. Are you? And this time, the question was not an insult. It was a realization. Because, whatever she was, it had just rewritten the rules of the room. Silence did not leave the hall. It settled. Heavier now. Denser. No longer the silence of mockery, but of uncertainty. Because the question still hung in the air. Unanswered. Unresolved. What are you? She did not respond. Not immediately. Her eyes remained locked on the Alpha King. Unflinching. Unreadable. And for a moment, it almost seemed like she wouldn't answer at all. But something beneath the surface shifted. Not outwardly. Not in a way the crowd could name. But internally. A fracture. The same fracture that had once spread beneath her fingertips, now spreading somewhere deeper. Inside. Her breathing slowed. Then deepened. Then stilled. And when she finally spoke, her voice did not match the girl who had been kneeling moments ago. It was quieter. Lower. Controlled. But beneath it, something ancient stirred. I told myself, a pause. Not for effect. For control. I could keep it buried. The words were not for the crowd. Not even for the king. They were for herself. A memory began to bleed into the present. Not as a flash. Not as a vision. But as a feeling. Cold nights. Locked doors. Whispers behind walls. A child. Small. Alone. Hands pressed against stone just like now. Except then, the cracks had been hidden. Covered. Denied. Don't let her lose control. She's not like the others. If it awakens, we won't survive it. Voices. Fragments. Echoes of fear disguised as protection. Her fingers twitched slightly at her side. They said I was weak. A breath. Slow. Measured. But weakness. Her gaze flickered for the briefest second. Not away, but inward. Was never the problem. A faint tremor ran through the floor beneath her feet. So slight. Only those closest felt it. Across the hall, the warrior she had thrown groaned again, but no one looked at him now. No one cared. Because something far more dangerous was unfolding. The Alpha King did not interrupt. For the first time since she had entered his domain, he allowed the moment to belong to her. Because instinct, that same instinct that had built empires and crushed rebellions, was telling him something critical. Listen. They sealed it. The words landed differently. Heavier. Older. A murmur passed through the crowd. Confused. Uneasy. But she continued. From the moment I was born, her voice did not rise. It did not break. It descended. They knew. The air grew colder. not physically, but perceptually, like something unseen had entered the space between breaths. Blood like mine, her fingers curled slowly into her palm. Doesn't fade. Another crack. This time, audible. A sharp, splitting sound beneath her feet as the obsidian floor fractured another inch outward. Gasps rippled through the hall. They didn't fear what I was.
A pause.
Her jaw tightened. Just slightly. They feared what I would become. And there it was. Not a confession. A revelation. The crowd shifted. Instincts no longer aligned. Predator and prey. No longer clearly defined. She was cast out. The narration lowered, threading through the moment like a quiet blade. Not because she was weak.
A breath.
But because she was uncontainable. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed. Not in suspicion. In realization. Every detail. Every contradiction. Every unnatural restraint. It aligned. The trembling. The collapse. The suppression. It wasn't failure. It was containment. And he had pushed it. Her voice returned. Closer now.
Sharper.
I learned to hide it.
A step. Not backward.
Forward. The movement was small, but the reaction it caused was not. Several wolves instinctively stepped back. Not consciously. Not willingly. Their bodies simply obeyed something deeper. I learned to make myself smaller. Another crack split through the floor. Louder this time. Longer. Quieter. The torches along the walls flickered violently. Flames bending as though pulled by an unseen force. Weaker. The word lingered. Heavy with irony. Her eyes lifted fully now. Meeting the Alpha King without obstruction. Without disguise. And what stared back at him was not submission. It was something far older. Far colder. Far more dangerous. The realization hit him completely now. Not as a thought. As instinct. He hadn't discovered a weak omega. He had provoked something ancient. Something sealed. Something. Waking up. The air tightened. The pressure in the room began to shift again. But this time, it did not come from the wolves. It came from her. Uncontrolled. Unfiltered.
And rising.
The ground beneath her feet trembled. At first, just a vibration. Then, a pulse.
Stone groaned.
Cracks splintered outward like veins under strain. The wolves staggered slightly, balance faltering as the very foundation of the hall reacted. The Alpha King did not move. But for the first time, something unfamiliar touched his expression. Not fear, but the recognition of something that could become it. Her voice came again. Lower now, less restrained. And this time, it wasn't just heard. It was felt. You. A pause. Heavy. Final. Should have left me alone. The words echoed, not just through the hall, but through everything. And, beneath them, something answered. Something that had been waiting to be unleashed. The warning came too late. Because the moment she spoke, you should have left me alone. Something answered. Not from the hall. Not from the wolves. From within her. It did not rise gently. It did not unfold. It erupted. Her body stiffened, not in pain, not in fear, in release. A pulse exploded outward from her core, invisible yet violently undeniable, slamming into the walls, the pillars, the very air itself. The torches along the chamber walls shattered their rhythm, flames whipping sideways as if caught in a storm that had no source. Wind tore through the great hall. Not a natural wind. A force. It screamed through the stone corridors, ripping banners from their mounts, dragging cloaks and hair into chaotic motion. The polished obsidian floor groaned beneath the pressure. And then,
cracked.
This time,
there was nothing subtle about it.
Fractures spidered outward in every direction from where she stood, splitting the ground like a living thing trying to escape its own skin. Gasps turned into silence. Silence turned into something else entirely. Submission. Because one by one, the wolves began to drop. Not willingly. Not consciously. Instinctively. Their bodies reacted before their pride could resist it. Knees struck the ground. Hands braced against the shaking floor. Heads lowered. Not in respect. In survival. The pressure crushing down on them now was not dominance. It was something older, something primal, something that did not ask to be acknowledged. It demanded it. Across the hall, warriors who had never bowed to anyone found themselves unable to stand. Their muscles locked, their breath shortened. Their instincts screamed one command: yield. And at the center of it all, she rose. Slowly. Not rushed. Not dramatic. But inevitable. Her body lifted from where it had been crouched, unfolding upward as if gravity itself had lost its hold on her. For the first time since she had entered the hall, she stood. Fully. No tremor. No hesitation. No weakness. Her head lifted. And her eyes glowed. Not like fire. Not like light. But like something alive behind them. Something ancient pressing forward through a human shell that could no longer contain it. Energy rippled outward from her in waves, visible now in the distortion of the air itself, bending light, warping perception. The hall could not hold it. The wolves could not withstand it. And even the Alpha King felt it. His body tensed, not by choice. His control, perfect, absolute, slipped. For a fraction of a second, his wolf surfaced, not fully, not unleashed, but present. A flicker behind his eyes, a shift in his stance, a tightening of something deep within him that had not been challenged in years. And that was enough, because it had not been summoned. It had been provoked. The realization settled into him with chilling clarity. This was not a display, not a rebellion. This was an awakening. And he had caused it. She took a step forward. The ground beneath her foot cracked on impact. Not from force, from pressure. The energy surrounding her intensified, wrapping around her like an invisible storm barely contained within the shape of her body. Another step. Wolves flinched. Some lowered their heads further. Others shut their eyes completely, as if refusing to see would somehow protect them. But nothing could, because she was no longer hiding, no longer restraining, no longer pretending. She walked through the hall. Not as prey, not as a challenger, but as something that existed above the rules they had built. Every step echoed, not just in sound, but in dominance, toward the throne, toward him. The same throne where she had been judged, mocked, broken, or so they thought. The Alpha King did not retreat. He did not move. He stood his ground as she approached, his gaze locked onto hers with a focus that had shifted beyond curiosity, beyond control, into something deeper, recognition, not of weakness, not of threat, but of truth. Because standing before him now was not an anomaly, not a mistake, but something that had always existed, waiting, buried, until now. She stopped just before him, close enough that the air between them distorted visibly under the pressure of their opposing forces, close enough that the entire hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. Her presence pressed against him, relentless, unyielding, and for the first time, the balance between them was no longer certain. Her head tilted slightly, not in submission, in question, and when she spoke, her voice carried no strain, no restraint, only certainty. Do you still think I'm weak? The words did not echo. They landed, heavy, final, and in their wake, the entire kingdom waited to see whether their king would kneel or break. The questions did not fade. It lingered. Do you still think I'm weak? The air between them tightened, not with movement, not with violence, but with expectation. Because this was the moment the entire hall had been unconsciously building toward. Not the awakening, not the display of power, but the answer. The Alpha King did not respond immediately. He stood there, unmoving, unflinching, yet everything about him had changed. The arrogance that once defined his presence, gone. The dismissive certainty, gone. What remained was something far more dangerous. Clarity. His gaze held hers, not as ruler to subject, not as predator to prey, but as one force, recognizing another. Around them, the wolves remained frozen in place, kneeling, bowed, unable to rise beneath the crushing weight of her presence. No one dared to speak. No one dared to move, because instinct had already decided what their minds could not yet accept. And still, she did nothing. No attack. No strike. No final blow to seal her dominance. She simply stood there, waiting. And that was the true pressure. Because in a world built on violence, on displays of strength and conquest, restraint was something far more terrifying. The Alpha King's jaw tightened slightly. A subtle shift, barely visible, but inside, something was happening. Not fear, never fear, but resistance. His instincts, ancient, unyielding, forged through years of absolute dominance, pushed back against the force pressing down on him, demanded control, demanded supremacy. For a moment, the air trembled again. His aura surged, not wild, not uncontrolled, but vast. A deep, crushing presence rolled outward from him, colliding directly with hers. Two opposing forces meeting in the center of the hall like titans testing the boundaries of existence itself. The floor groaned. Cracks deepened. The very structure of the hall strained under the weight of their collision. Some wolves cried out, collapsing further as the pressure doubled. Others clenched their teeth, bodies shaking violently, just trying to remain conscious. This was the clash. Not of fists, not of claws, but of will. Her eyes did not waver. If anything, they sharpened, because she felt it. His resistance, his refusal, his identity as Alpha, pushing back against her existence. And for a fraction of a second, it almost held. Almost. Then, she stepped forward. Just one step. And everything changed. Her presence did not spike. It did not explode. It descended, like a weight too vast to measure, too absolute to resist. His aura buckled, not shattered, not destroyed, but overridden. The invisible force he had unleashed faltered under the sheer density of what she carried, something older, deeper, more fundamental than dominance itself. His breath caught, not from pain, from realization, because this was not something he could overpower. This was something he could only acknowledge. The space between them collapsed, not physically, but hierarchically. For the first time, the balance tipped. His body reacted. Before his mind could intervene. Before pride could reassert itself. Before identity could anchor him in place. His knee bent, a single inch. Then, it touched the ground. The sound was quiet, almost inaudible. But in the silence of the hall, it echoed like a thunderclap. Gasps ripped through the crowd. Sharp, disbelieving, because what they were witnessing was impossible. The Alpha King, unchallenged, unbroken, unmatched, had lowered himself, not struck down, not defeated in battle, but forced by something he could not deny. His head remained lifted for a moment longer, eyes still locked on hers, and in them, there was no humiliation, no shame, only understanding. Then slowly, deliberately, he lowered his head, not in surrender, in recognition. The hall froze. Every wolf present felt it, not just as a sight, but as a shift in the very structure of their world. Because hierarchy was not spoken, it was felt, and in that moment, it rewrote itself. She stood before him, unmoving, unchallenged, unquestioned, not because she demanded it, but because it was now undeniable. The wind that had once torn through the hall began to settle. The pressure eased, not gone, but controlled, contained, by her. The cracks in the floor stopped spreading. The torches steadied. The air, though still heavy, became breathable once more. But no one rose. No one dared, because they had seen it, felt it, understood it, and nothing would ever be the same again. The narration lowered, slow, final. The strongest Alpha, a pause, had just submitted, and in the silence that followed, a new order began to take shape. Silence remained, but it had changed. No longer heavy with fear alone. No longer suffocating with tension. Now, it carried something else. acceptance. The kind that does not come from understanding, but from witnessing something that cannot be undone. The Alpha King remained where he knelt, head lowered, breath steady, not broken, but altered, because what had just occurred was not defeat, it was revelation. And revelations, once seen, could never be unseen. Around them, the wolves did not rise.
Not yet.
Their bodies still bowed, still grounded by instinct that had not finished recalibrating, because hierarchy had shifted, and instinct needed time to catch up with truth. At the center of it all, she stood, unmoving, unquestioned. The storm that had erupted from her had quieted now, but it had not disappeared. It lingered, subtle, controlled, like a sleeping force that no longer needed to prove it was there. Her eyes moved slowly across the hall, not searching, not uncertain, observing, and everywhere her gaze touched, heads lowered further, eyes dropped, bodies stilled, not in fear alone, but in recognition, because she was no longer the girl who had entered that hall. She was no longer the one who had trembled under their laughter, no longer the one who had collapsed beneath their pressure. That identity had been erased, replaced, and even now, beyond these walls, beyond this kingdom, something intangible was already spreading. A shift in the unseen currents that connected every territory, every pack, every alpha who believed themselves untouchable. A whisper, not carried by voice, but by instinct. Something has awakened. Back in the hall, a subtle movement broke the stillness. The Alpha King lifted his head. Slowly, deliberately. His gaze found her again. But this time, there was no challenge in it. No resistance. Only clarity. Only truth. He rose. Not as a ruler reclaiming dominance. Not as a king asserting control. But as something changed. His movements were measured. Grounded. He stood before her once more. But the distance between them no longer felt like hierarchy. It felt like alignment waiting to be understood. For a moment, he said nothing, because words carried weight now, and this moment required precision. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than it had ever been. Not weaker, but stripped of everything unnecessary. I didn't mock weakness. A pause. His eyes did not leave hers. I awakened a queen. The words settled into the hall like a final piece locking into place. No one questioned it. No one resisted it. Because they had all seen it, felt it, lived through the moment where illusion shattered, and truth stood in its place. She held his gaze for a second longer. Not in defiance. Not in dominance. But in acknowledgement. Then, she turned. No hesitation. No lingering. Just movement. She walked toward the great doors of the hall. Each step calm, measured. The same hall that had once tried to break her, now parted before her. No one stood in her way. No one spoke. No one dared. The massive doors opened, not by command, but by instinct of those closest to them, their bodies reacting before thought could intervene. Light spilled into the hall, cold, wide, endless. She stepped into it, and did not look back. Behind her, there was movement, soft at first, subtle, then unified. One by one, the wolves began to rise. Not all at once, not in unison, but with a shared understanding. And then, they followed, not chasing, not pursuing, following, because something in them, something deeper than loyalty, deeper than fear, had already chosen. At the center of the hall, the Alpha King remained still for a moment longer, watching the space where she had stood, where everything had changed. Then slowly, he turned, not toward the throne, but toward the open doors, toward the light she had stepped into. And for the first time, the throne behind him felt irrelevant. The narration softened, reflective, final. She entered the hall as nothing, a breath, and left as something the world had never seen before. Outside, the wind carried her presence into the distance, across forests, across mountains, across kingdoms that had not yet realized their balance had already begun to shift. And somewhere, Deep beneath power, beneath hierarchy, beneath everything they believed defined strength, a new truth settled. The era of kings, a pause, was over.